Hey everyone, welcome to Conversation with Tim. We're grateful you're here, whether you're watching live tonight or whether you're going to watch on demand later. Thank you for spending a few minutes to watch with us. For those who haven't caught one of these yet, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's Conversation with Tim. I'm Tim, and they have conversations with me, whoever I have come on. We talk about church stuff, Bible topics and all that kind of thing. We talk about God's will and praise and different things. And a few weeks ago, we talked about economic development topics and in rural America. Like I said, last week, we talked about racism. Week before that, we had the health department folks come on and talk about, opening things up and what we need to do to be safe in Macoupin County. So we cover a wide range of topics. The common denominator, these are my friends. Tonight, I have another one of my friends. His name is Dalton Vann. And Dalton is, I'll let him kind of introduce himself here in a few seconds, but he's a friend of mine from college days. So we played football together. We both wide receivers. He knew me when I had hair, that sort of thing. And so we're going to talk about racism again. We did that last week. We'll do it again tonight. Just because I want to use what voice I have to help us understand some of the topics that are faced in America, the role the church ought to play, the role followers of Christ ought to play. So even though we live in a very rural area that has a low percentage of color in it, of any kind of ethnicity of any kind, we still have a role to play. And so we want to just kind of talk about it. I want you to understand what Dalton's experiences have been, where he's come from. Last week is to my pastor friends from Chicago. And if you missed that one, you can catch that on YouTube. But I'll go ahead and bring Dalton in. Let me introduce everybody to Dalton. This is my friend Dalton, and he's a handsome guy. Still has his hair after all these years, and I don't. So that tells you all you need to know right there. So Dalton, why don't you kind of catch us up a little bit? Obviously, you and I have talked, but for our listeners, they don't have any of your background. So were you born in Kansas City? Is that where you began life at?
Born and raised in Kansas City. Actually in the inner city of Kansas City until the age of, I say 10 to 12. Hard to remember all the way back, but I moved to a suburb in Lee Summit, right outside of Kansas City. So came from a two-parent home, had both my mom and dad, until my dad actually passed away in 99. So I was very fortunate to come from a two-parent home. Both parents educated and did a lot of things for us, sacrificed for us, those things you don't know until later on in life. So
right.
my mom's still living and still sacrificing every day, still dealing with me every day, and does a great job with that. I probably should call her when we get off of here, just to keep in touch. Like I said, Kansas City, went to William A. Knotts Elementary School and moved out before that, and then moved to a city called Lee Summit, suburb. So I went from a pretty much all black elementary school to a pretty much all white elementary school. A middle school there in Lee Summit. Pleasantly middle school, called junior high back then. So went there, spent time there. Not too many black kids at that time. I believe that was 78, 79, somewhere in there. And not too many of us out there. And so then hit high school as well. Same thing, went to a predominantly white high school. So when you talk about race relations, I probably have a different view from both ends of the spectrum because of the fact of who my friends were and then who my friends became, and then the friends I kept for life. And so, and during this tumultuous times, I think being on both sides of the spectrum, if you want to split race down the middle, I really have great friends on both sides. So it's I've been very fortunate. Got saved at the age of 14. I still remember it because I just talked to this lady not too long ago, Patricia Lamb, helped me get saved. She was a white lady next door to me, kept begging me to go to church, and I'm like, nah, not going up there. And pretty soon I decided to go, and her family welcomed me to go to church with them, and it was right around the corner, and got baptized at Oakwood Baptist Church there in Lee Summit. Um, and of course, sometimes you slip and slide and fall, through the years of being a teenager and doing that. But just very fortunate that I was around sports, and I think sports kept me out of trouble. I think sports took me places other people could not have gone, and I had friends that just the average student would not have had during that time. So I have issues about those times, but when I look back at those times, I don't think I would trade high school for too many things, because I had a great time in high school. Met my wife at high school, so still married today to my high school sweetheart, and the love we share came from those times. You know what I mean? And it's an interracial marriage at that. And so I just remember us talking and saying, if we could make it through these high school years, you know what I mean? If we made it through the high school years with that, everything else should be easy, right? And so we share those times together and different things like that. So I can go back over the high school stuff and all that stuff later. This gives you a chance to know that. Also started coaching. I probably coached half my life. Part of it's been with youth and middle school, and then also high school as well. So I stepped down from coaching back in 2017. My last season was 2016. I was at a private Christian school. Summit Christian Academy is the name of the school. And I stepped down from there just because I felt like God was taking me somewhere else. You get that feeling where it's time to go. God was, and it was. I think I'd hit my ceiling spiritually at the school. If that can set in for you. It sure wasn't because of football, because of the fact that I just won 21 out of my last 25 football games.
Oh, wow.
And so we were on a high riding through, and I decided to step down. So it was good. It's good.
So now you're in Jackson, Tennessee. That's where you're there.
Yeah, my wife and I we're in Jackson, Tennessee. Man, never thought I'd live in the South. I said that out of my mouth, and here I am.
So you've gone from inner city to white suburb to
the South,
country, Jackson, Tennessee, the South.
To the South, yeah. And so it's good. I'm at a school right now called Arlington Elementary, and it's just a difference than I've ever been around in a long time. When you look at the kids that I'm dealing with now, they have struggles, and I think that God placed me here to learn some things and to allow me to take a step back and look how fortunate my life really was, and come down and be a mentor to kids that look like me. And so that's my whole thing, my whole plight for life, this last chapter of life, so to speak. I'd like to just be that man of God and allow kids to see a man of color, but a man of God also, someone to look up to, right. And then not only just kids, but also young men. What I'm looking to be is that Paul to a bunch of Timothys. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so and that's where I'm going now.
Well, while we're on that topic of where you are in Jackson and working with the elementary kids, so obviously we're going through this COVID-19 season.
Right.
So as a teacher, you would have they'd shut down schools, and you guys do the e-learning thing, and so one of the things, there's all kinds. I make a statement sometimes that I talk about this topic of harmonic unity. That there are certain things I think 100% people will be able to agree to, and one of those would be that racism in all of its forms is wrong, and the second would be that if you think that racism is right or okay, then you're wrong. So I think that people will be able to agree to that, and But a lot of times we don't understand how to define race, which we'll talk about in a second. But there's so many kind of pieces to that. We talk about privilege and all these different kind of things and the systemic stuff or whatever. So how did you guys handle e-learning being in a kind of a poverty-stricken area?
Well, we didn't, just to be honest with you, in my opinion. We tried to do the best we could, but here's the thing about that is, and this is part of the issue too, is that when you're trying to, everybody wants to have an even playing field. When it comes to education, there's not an even playing field when you split it up into, especially to people who are economically strapped. Okay, so we have schools here, private Christian schools, who COVID, took them out of the classroom, but didn't take them out of the class, if you know what I mean. Because they could go home to their computers and their internet and the books that they have there, and their teacher can come on. You can have Zoom, classes, and they're able to do that. My school district is a very different atmosphere. I mean, there are kids who don't have, access to the internet. They don't have Chromebooks or computers. If they do have access to the internet, it's on their mom or dad's phone. You know what I mean? And you're not getting that from them all day. And so I think that COVID was a disadvantage to the economically strapped kids because they could not continue to do the things that they were supposed to be doing educational wise to keep up. And so, and on that, what means they lost, their fourth quarter of school, where other kids were able to finish school. So now as a young third or fourth grader, if I go back to school this fall, I'm starting off behind.
Right.
I equate it to, let's say you and I were running a 100-yard dash, which neither one of us could probably finish right now. But and so, but if we were running the 100-yard dash and I'm at the starting line and you're 40 yards ahead of me, right? And the gun goes off, pow, let's start running. And then you get to the finish line first, and I had to stop where I was at. That's how much further you are ahead in that race. And that's what I equate to what COVID did to some of our kids in the school district, knowing that some of us were already behind anyway. And so now we're still behind and didn't get finished that year. And I just hope it doesn't hurt them in the long run. Yeah. And then even when they start, Tim, check this out. So even when they start school this coming year, teachers may say, hey, we need to go back to where we were when we ended and try to catch up where the other kids are starting off where they're supposed to be and getting further ahead. And that's the worry that you have about the school districts and the indifference in economically strapped kids compared to the ones who have the money to do what they want to do.
Yeah, we see that around here. We're in a rural area, and we have a great school district. Our school district is amazing, but we have a lot of lower income students, and I hear teachers all the time. They're worried about their students. I mean, they grieve some of the home environments, or things like they don't have internet at home or whatever they would say. Just it's going to be a really, I don't say interesting is not the right word, but interesting transition for teachers this coming fall to get kids back and get them acclimated. Really, those younger kids, especially, because they make such headway in March, April, May in that fourth quarter, and they didn't get that. Some of them didn't get that time, and if they don't have, parents at home to help them, or, it's going to be a rough time. So let's kind of transition from that and talk about just the general atmosphere of our nation. I come from you do too, from a biblical worldview, and we see it as spiritual. We recognize it's flesh and blood. There's organizations and there's people and there's government and there's stuff going on around us. But at the end of the day, we place our faith in Christ. And but as we kind of look at the darkness, it's clearly getting darker. I mean, whatever you and I would talk about growing up or when we met each other in college and all those kind of things, it's way darker than it used to be. That's a fair statement, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you I always look further back than where I'm at. I look at the where my mom and dad come from. My dad, if he was alive today, would be 80 years old. And that's why anytime I get a chance to sit and listen to one of the elderly guys, we call them the old heads, I get to listen to those guys and talk stories. I called my uncle about a picture that I found that had my mom and my dad and my grandmother, and there was another guy in that picture. I wanted to know who that picture was, of that guy was. And so just listening to them brings across a lot of things about how far we've come. And then so they came this far to where I'm at now, and now we've come. Now we need to go further. We cannot ever be satisfied with where we are now as a nation, especially in the Christian our Christian society. And here's the thing on that too, is that I think that our churches and our Christian men especially cannot sit and be silent on issues of race. I look back because I studied some of the civil rights movement and different things like that. The civil rights movement didn't gain its strength and speed and power until the church came out. That's where your power and strength comes out, and speaking out against some of the things that are happening and standing up for things that should happen. And so that's what I believe. But we've come a long way and still have a long way to go. And if you look at the videos and the things that are going now, it'll tell you we got a long road ahead of us.
And I agree about the role of the church, man. I think the church doesn't make legislation, and we can't fix all the systemic stuff and whatever. But if people who may disagree on politics or on whatever the word is, we recognize like in the United States as brothers in Christ, we are brothers in Christ, and we share the same blood. And Satan wants to create the division, so he can keep us separated. And if we're separated, we can't resolve the problem. And of course, I use us as athletes and raising in team environments, and you still coaching. I still help coach at a high school level, and it's if we have a team that's divided, they're not going to win very many football games because they're getting all caught up in who's dating whose girlfriend or whatever's going on. So a team has to have team unity and lay down certain things. And I think that's kind of how I see the world. And if people or organizations or the demonic or whatever it is can keep people like you and I separated by our differences or the divisions that make us not talk and listen and work through problems, then we'll never solve racism.
Right.
But if I take a few minutes to get to know you, and hear where you come from and how you see the things you've been through and your perspective, I have to have empathy for that. I mean, the Holy Spirit in me will make me love you. That's that whole we're supposed to love God and love people. It's hard to follow Christ and you don't love people. I mean, it's just the way it works. So I think the church steps up in that. I think we can see a lot of headway.
But that's difficult. You know what I mean? We can say we love everybody, but do we show we love everybody? And that's the difficulty in it is saying that. It's even as a father, sometimes I get caught up in thinking my kids should know that I love them. You know what I mean? They should absolutely know for the things that I do that I love them.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, I still need to tell them.
Right.
I need to tell them and show them. So when I was coaching, I always talk about, you got to get on a kid, you got to kill on the kid, and sometimes you got to kick him, right in the butt. But after you kick him in the butt, you got to pat him on the back as well.
Right.
And so what I'm seeing is in society today is that we're doing a lot of kicking in the butt, but not patting on the back. We've got a younger generation just waiting to step up in the forefront and take the lead. But you know what? Giving back to the football analogy, your team takes on the personality of their coach.
Yes.
And so what we're missing right now is a bunch of coaches leading the teams. And there's a gap in leadership. in all communities. You know what I mean? Because we need that now, and I feel like there's that gap. My pastor at home back at Graceway, he was talking last week, and he was talking about there's a gap, and some people want to fill the gap, but he asked us to stand in that gap. You know what I mean? And be that bridge that takes place. Like you and I were talking, like, you know, the quote is the most segregated day in America is Sunday still during church time. And so the challenge would be for black pastors and white pastors to come together and allow their congregation to fellowship at some point in time over a picnic or something, whatever that is, and kind of ease that, you know, pain of what's going on, you know. But it's going to take that leader, and we can't sit back and just be quiet, man. I do not. This is my thing is, I do not like soft, quiet Christians. It just it bothers me because my Jesus wasn't like that. You know what I mean? He took the brutal brunt of what was given to him and beat it and defeated it. And he's given us some of those same strength and characteristics to allow us to do the same thing. And so I think once I don't care if you're black, white, pink, or plaid, if you're claiming to be a Christian, a follower of Christ, you need to step up and step out to allow this thing to get squashed. And we just need to do it now.
I agree. So let's kind of define some terms, like let's find out your definition of what racism is, because I use the phrase a lot that racism in all of its forms. Okay, so let's kind of talk about racism, and while we're in that conversation, you know, what's the difference of being racist and being prejudiced? You know, that may lead us into things like talking about injustice or inequality or whatever. But just how would you describe racism to someone who may not understand it very well?
To me, racism is when you're solely focused in on the race of the individual. You're solely focused in on not liking that person or disgruntled with that person because of his race, or in this case, if you just cut it down black and white, because of the color. You know what I mean? I'm not going to listen to him, no open mind about it because he's white. You know what I mean? And that's all I need to know. And on that end is that some people say, well, you know what? Well, I don't see color. Well, I told you how I feel about that. I think we all see color. You know what I mean? I'm black, and I'm gonna be black till the day I die. You know what I mean? And that's an issue if you tell me you don't see that, because God made this black man. Just accept my blackness, and we're going to be okay. That's what I think racism is, when you just focused in on the race and you just have no tolerance for whatever's going on. I think prejudice, on the other hand, is when you decide to prejudge someone or a situation, you know, and I'm guilty of that. You know, I think all of us have prejudice, you know. I tell the story about, I was just in Walmart and I went to go get, you know, a couple of meds, and there was nobody in line, dude. And so I was like, great, get up there and they don't have them ready. And she says, they'll just be ready in 10 minutes or so. Can you, I said, okay, I'll go do some shopping. You know what I mean? And I ain't gonna lie, I bought some snacks. You know what I'm saying? So I went in and got a few snacks, you know, and I come back and now there's several people in line. But I had already been there, and she said, when you come back, you can just come on. So I start to walk up, you know, easing up to go through, and this lady just kind of tilts her head and just like looks at me. I mean, like gives me this, you know, stanky look. And I'm like, okay. But I didn't say anything. So I said, I'm not going to say anything. But my thought was, you know, what's going on here? What is it? You know? And so I get ready to get my things, and she said, okay, I'll be with you in just a second. There was a guy in a wheelchair, and I said, hey man, go ahead, but I'll just go up right after you. And so he got his stuff and wheeled out, and she took a step, but you know, I took that quicker step. You know what I mean? I'm a little overweight, but I'm still quick. So I got my space in, and so I got up in there and I got my stuff. Okay, so now I'm thinking, she's thinking, who is this black guy cutting in front of me. You know, I know that in my mind, I know that's what she's thinking, but I didn't say anything because I've learned to sit back and think about things before opening my mouth. Whereas when you knew me younger, I didn't worry about that. I just spoke first, you know, and so I stepped back and I'm thinking I'm getting my car and everything like that, and I started thinking, you know what? Maybe she didn't look at me because I was black. Maybe she looked at me because I cut in front of her, and that's what her thoughts were. She thought that I cut in front of her. It wouldn't have mattered if I was yellow. You cut in front of me, and maybe that was her thought, you know.
Right.
But I didn't. But my experiences led me into that thought, and I think that's what happens with a lot of people who we could call prejudices. They've already thought something before they allowed the whole situation to occur. You get what I'm
Right.
saying there?
Yep.
That's my thoughts on racism and prejudice and the difference between the two.
Yeah, I think everybody, we got some kind of prejudice, whether it's about loud, we don't like loud people or
Mhm.
white people or, tall people,
Right.
people. I mean, just some kind of, whatever it may be. A lot of times it goes back to some kind of woundedness in our past where it reminds us of somebody that hurt us or a bad experience, a lot of times. And it's part of being a human and working through and recognizing those things, being self-aware enough to recognize what you're struggling with. So how would you kind of define the inequality? That's one of the words we use a lot. We're trying to, what we really need to strive for is equality.
Yeah.
And, that brings into privilege, white privilege. And, so like you were at some level, you were privileged. Your parents moved you out of the inner city. You got
Right.
some opportunities that some other kids didn't get just because you're an athlete. I mean, the
Right.
fact you were a good athlete as opposed to an average athlete or the kid who just played sports, because some kids just play sports.
Yeah.
There's different
Right.
kinds of, I'll say, privilege that come.
Mm-hmm.
Me being born in a small town to, like both of us, our parents stayed together throughout their lives, so that
Mm-hmm.
gives us a leg up in some ways in the privileged world over people who had broken homes and all kinds of in-laws and outlaws that came and went, so there's all kinds of versions of that. But
Right.
how would you kind of help us understand, words like prejudice and inequality and the injustices? How would you kind of put that in context for us?
Well, first of all, I'll answer you, make a statement on the privileged part. You can be economically privileged. You can be, athletically privileged. I perceive myself to be, even in college. You know what I mean? I was a good athlete. You know, if you and I were just talking, I'd tell you how good I really was. You know what I mean? But
I know.
but
And I give you
but
crap about it, and I'd call you by your nickname.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. That is true. I don't mind it. Booty was my nickname in college because of my derriere, and and now it's probably two booties. I don't know, but I will say this: you and I both played wide receiver in college, and now we're just both wide, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll just go with that. But here's the thing on the privilege that's the difference that I see. You and I will just talk about me and you, okay? You and I, when you talk about white privilege, you are able to go places and do things without eyeballs. That's part of that. You know what I mean? I try to keep it down to the simplest form because I do know brothers that have money. I know black people that have money. They live in the big houses. They doing the things like that. So they are economically privileged. But when it boils down to the simplest thing about driving in your car, and I was on a call last week, and we were talking about it. One of my former players was on the phone call, and we were talking about the talk that black men have to talk about to their black sons about, keep your hand at 10 and 2 to get pulled over, make sure you got all your stuff together, make sure it's lined up. Some people even throw their hands out out the window, make sure you know where my stuff is at. And he stated to me, my former student called me after the call because he knows Duran and Michael. And he said, Coach, I don't get that where you say you had to talk to them about if the police pulled over. And so I went to tell him about the talk I would have with my kids. You know what I mean? And he says, I never, that doesn't even cross my mind when I get pulled over. I said, I know. You get pulled over, and you'd say, hey, you know what, guy, I was probably speeding. I don't know how fast I was going. I know I shifted down or whatever you say, and it becomes a talk, and then you say, well, just give me the ticket. You know what I mean? And everything may go fine. When I get pulled over, I feel like it's different in some aspects, in some ways, depending on it. And here's depending on, like, for instance, with when I drive in the car with my wife, who's white, I will not ever drive in the car with my hat backwards and be in the passenger side, because when I was younger, I got pulled. If we would get pulled over, and she could tell you this, we get pulled over, and the police officer would come and say, I need to see your license, registration, to me, and I'm not even driving. And that's where the line draws for me, where I want to say why and start to argue and different things, and it can escalate. But because I know it can escalate, I just say, hey, look, here it is. Especially when she gives me that look, like, come on, not today, please, Dalton, not today. You know what I mean? And I say, okay, so then
some things are the same, whether you're black or white or yellow or green.
Yeah,
there's some things that are the same, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah. And so I have to do that. And so I've had bad experiences with police officers, but I know some great police officers. I have friends who are police officers. So never will I let the bad experiences that I had override and say, well, there's way more bad cops than there is good. In my heart, I believe, this is what I believe. I believe there's more good cops than there are bad. But I don't believe, like, people, there's this thing I've been reading on Facebook, 99% of the cops are good. Now, I wouldn't go that high. That's
Right.
just me. Because, and then I would have to say, well, I met all 1% of those then. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, but we just have to have a fine line of where that is. And so that's what I call a privilege. When those lights come on, you're not worried. You pull over. You don't say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know what I mean? Or anything like that. Or when your kids go out, when they first get their license, everybody's nervous about the first license, and they're worried about them. I don't want them to wreck. I don't want them. I'm trusting to get. I'm saying, dude, get back home.
Right.
Not because of a wreck. I don't want you to get pulled over. I don't want you to be in a bad situation. And think about that. Those are things that we go through. And I'm not saying that's just for black men saying to their black. I think there has to be white men who've had that conversation as well. I just think it's more prevalent in the black community that you have that talk with your kids.
Yeah, I get that. I believe that's. I mean, but you're right. I wear my hat backwards sometimes, and I think a lot of us did that, especially growing up and stuff. And I never thought that would get me pulled over somehow. Never crossed my mind. So
Right.
So while we're on that topic, let's kind of go talk the history a little bit. It's like we've had a lot of conversations about this, so my brain's kind of going different directions. But it's like you just mentioned, like the Star Spangled Banner. Okay, and we're not trying to be political. For anybody who's watching, that's not how we're operating. We're just we're trying to learn and understand each other and how people think. So I grow up. I learned history. I know certain things. I probably overlooked certain things. I didn't pay attention to certain things, whatever it is. And Dalton be the same way. Except there's some pieces of history that he thinks about that I didn't ever think about. I never crossed my mind,
Right.
Like one of the things you said to me today was, the Constitution was written, and talk about how 1776, and then you said, what would I have been in that? We're talking about life and liberty and pursuit of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
but yet you would have been property.
Right.
That's not my history. That's not how I think about that.
No, you don't.
I'm thinking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
They didn't really mean for their property, or they would have released them that day.
Exactly. So here's my thoughts on that. Is that so? I'll go through with a person. We'll start talking about certain things, and he'll say, "Man, slavery was a long time ago." You know what I mean? But to me, slavery has affected us longer than when it happened. So he says, "Well, everybody has the right to do whatever." Now, and I'll take them through. 1776. Okay. That's when, the Constitution was signed. I'm sure it was made before that, but it was signed 1776. And now here we are in America. And, the fireworks are going off, and it's a beautiful thing, right? And so, but if I put me as a black male, in that time, what would I be? And I actually went through this with a teacher at SBU, starting to, went through that history. But even when I go through with people, I say, so what would I have been? I even ask some kids that, what would I have been? Well, I don't know what you've been. What would you have been? I don't know. What kind of business would you? No. You have to take a quick look at me. And this is where I say that term about not seeing color. You have to see me and understand me and then feel me at the time. Right. So I would say in 1776, myself and people who looked like me, black people, would have been slaves. Oh, man. That's right. So when the Constitution was written, and, all men are created equal. So when the Constitution was written, what was I? This is just going back in history, the overthinking. It kind of gives you a feeling of how some people could feel. Right. And you have to put yourself in those shoes so you can feel what they feel. So what was that Constitution was talking about? Men. Well, I was not a man at that time when they signed that. I was property. So, and as a matter of fact, I think the census, I would have had 3/5 of a person, I think is what it was. And so now you flip to now, and you've got this, thing with the flag and the Star Spangled Banner and all these other, statues. You can go into a whole different thing. That's why when we talk on our Zoom call, I have a Zoom call on Saturday mornings, and we were talking about race relations and different things like that. We call it peeling back the layers, because there's so many things that you have to peel back and look at, you know what I mean? And then we allow, black men and white men and whoever's on that phone, is a very diverse group on that call, that Zoom call, express their feelings. And then what I want from that call is to hope that somebody gets off that phone call and says, you know what, I never thought about that before. And that's the key thing. So if a white person is talking to a black person, they come across like that and say that to them, and then all of a sudden that white person says, oh, you know what? I never thought about that before. Yeah. So think about a black man who's being not forced, but saying, hey, demanded to stand up, sing the national anthem, and pay homage to that flag. When the Star Spangled Banner wasn't written for him, the flag was not made for him. How do you feel now about someone saying no to that? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you have to put yourself in the shoes and do that. And so I've done a lot of just research on it. Especially the third stanza in the Star Spangled Banner. Mention slaves in it and different things like that. So you just go along with history, and then you can understand why. Now, I'm not saying that's my belief. Both my kids served in the military. Okay, one's in and one's out. So you got my attention during um, that that time because of that's what he's serving for. But if I decided not to, I know that my son, who's about to be deployed here in a few days, is fighting for my right to protest whenever I wanted to. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I know that's what it is. And so that's another thing you have to understand is that the military goes out and they defend our right to do what we want to do on our homeland, so long as it's not threatening to some other person. So
While we're at this point, so you mentioned your Zoom call. So Adam is going to post the your email and contact information for a little bit about the Zoom call in the comment section. Um,
hmm
and so just kind of share for briefly what that is, and it's open to everybody, all men. Is that what that is?
yes, yes. So what we did when after the murder of George Floyd, um, that bothered me. It got to me because I was like, come on, man, no more. How much more can we take as a society? But the thing about that was it was right there for everybody to see. And I thought, how many kids saw this? You know what I mean? So let's put together an avenue where men can talk and express their feelings about how that made them feel. You know what I mean? Black men and white men, whoever's on that phone, that Zoom call can express their feelings about how they that made them feel. Like you said, we can all agree about racism is wrong. I don't think anybody in their right mind, to me, could tell that what had taken place um, that day, that was murder and it was wrong. You know what I mean? So we have some ground to stand on where we can agree on something, and let's take it from there. And that talk led us into police brutality, where there are some people in white America who may not believe that there is any police brutality against African Americans. So last week we actually had a police officer join our call, and I will tell you this: it was awesome to hear um, a Christian police officer. It was awesome to hear him talk about his stance on what had taken place, and very emotional for him as well. And for us to see a cop get emotional about a black man dying in the street, I don't know if I've ever seen that before or heard that before. And so to me, it got to me. And so we talked about certain things. For instance, like I asked him, so he gave a spiel about how he goes into a call and different things like that. And so I made the comment about, well, what about this? On the flip side of that, because I think there were some guys who may have been afraid to even say something to him after his. But what about the flip side of that? When you're it's serve, you take an oath to serve and protect, right? And you go down through the suburban neighborhood and everything's chill. You're waving and hi to everybody. But that serve and protect, I think, turns into policing when you go to a, let's say, a economically strapped ghetto area or an all black neighborhood. Now your policing hat comes on and you're there to police. And there's a difference between serving and protect and then I'm here to police. And I think that's a difference that he talked about as well. And for him to talk about that and say what he said was just, it hit me really, really well. So, so that's what we talk. We get to talk about things on the call, and we respect everybody who has something to say. So this week we'll be talking about the difference between racism and prejudice as well, and getting more in depth about it. We had thought about our topic maybe Colin Kaepernick, but I don't think our group's ready for that. You know what I mean? Because that's a whole lot to bite off. So we'll be attacking conversations like that, and Black Lives Matter, and our who's more prejudiced, black people or white people. We just need to talk about it. If we never talk about it, it'll never get solved. So we want our talk to get into people's feelings. Then we want our talk to turn into action, and then we want our action to turn into solutions. And right now, we just started, so we're at the talking stage.
So the Dalton Zoom call is every Saturday morning at 6:30. I know that's
6:30.
early, but that's
Yeah.
before you know the family's up and going, and everybody's got their stuff
Right.
to do.
Mhm.
You got it's either I'm sleeping or I can be on that Zoom call. So
Yeah.
men, if you want to be a part of that conversation, you don't have to talk. You act like there are people who just listen.
Right.
You don't have to
Right.
talk. Okay. But if you want to get on there, if you will, in the comment section, or if you don't see it down there later when you see this, if you'll reach out to me, I'll get you Dalton's email address. You email him, he'll contact you with the link that you need to get on the Zoom call. And then all you got to do is 6:30 in the morning on Saturday morning, just click that, and then he'll have the conversation, and you can just sit and listen. Because I think we need to be in a place where we're listening and understanding and
Exactly.
trying to get our heads around stuff. Because I think we all need to recognize that whether you see it as the flesh and blood, or you see it as the powers and principalities and rulers in high places,
Mhm.
there is something creating division among us. And if you can divide Dalton and I, so we can't be friends, then we can't solve anything. But if we can remove the division, we recognize that the one creating division is the real enemy. Dalton and I will destroy that because our hearts are. You listen to him. I mean, he wants to make a difference. He's trying to engage a conversation that he could ignore if he wanted to. But he's reaching out and saying, "Hey, I want to have a Zoom call with a bunch of men, and I just want to engage them, and I want us to kind of talk through this process and find solutions." And that's what America needs, more and more of that. So
we're not fluffy. You know what I mean? So
we're fluffy, all right.
Yeah, we are.
The conversation is not fluffy.
Yeah, the conversation's not fluffy. We don't want it to be. We're not going to sit around and hold hands and sing kumbaya. You know, that's not the issue. We want to get to the issue. We want to be men of God. And if you're not a believer, you're still welcome on the phone. Just don't on the Zoom call. Don't think that you can't. That is all just a bunch of Christian men. That if that's what it's all about. We can't sit within our own four walls and solve America's problems. It's not going to happen. You got to step out. And plus, God has commanded us to go out, right? He wants us to go. That's what it says. Go and make disciples. You know what I mean? If that means go, you can't stand in your own. You can't be in your own driveway the whole time or in your house. You got to step out. And then the other thing is, man, we got to get around people that don't look like us. You got to. You cannot go out. If I'm around my own peeps all the time, that's what I'm going to be like. You know what I mean? How do I expect a guy like you to understand a guy like me if we never talk or hang out? We put out 5 challenges a week, during the day, and we post them on my Facebook. And one of those things is perspective. Today, I think it was perspective, and then walking in someone else's shoes. You know what I mean? And then I think tomorrow may be love or something like that. I don't know. We get them in each day, and we put them out there, and we want people to try to do something every single day that's intentional. You have to be intentional about wanting to do your part, about standing in the gap of racism. You have to. If you're not intentional about it, we're just going to keep on going on. We're going to walk by each other in the grocery store, and everything's going to be the same way it's been the whole time. If you think about this, if you take this back to what you see on TV right now, and you take it back to 1992 when the Rodney King thing happened, we're repeating ourselves. We're repeating ourselves. You know what I mean? And so I just think, and these people who've been around a long time, they're saying we saw the same thing in the 60s.
Right.
And so we have to communicate. We have to come up with some type of solutions. You know what I mean? And some people think it's a lost cause.
Absolutely.
Hey man, this is gonna be the way it's gonna be. So just buckle up. You know what I mean? And I can't believe that as a believer of Christ. I can't believe that this is the plight for us, for humanity. Although I know it's, things will get worse before they get better, and we'll be persecuted for what we believe in and all of that. But for us to get along and do the things that we're supposed to be doing, I think I gotta believe there's something better out there.
Yeah. So why don't we? Let's kind of, we're getting about 10 minutes left. One of the things that we hear a lot, is like a fatigue that comes with, with during this COVID thing. We were doing everything online and stuff. And there's the fatigue that came with that, and people stopped, watching as much and things like that. There's also with this, there's a fatigue of just having this conversation, especially when we feel defeated. Like, what can I do to fix that? Do you sense there's a fatigue? And when you're trying to have conversations with people, they just don't want to hear about it anymore. They're done talking about it. They want to kind of put their head in the sands and move on. What's your experiences with that?
On both. There's both. There's people who are saying, "Hey, man, I'm sick and tired of seeing this police brutality, this racial thing. Every day it's on TV all the time. Can we just move on?" You know what I mean? Well, and I'll try to quote Lisa Leslie as I can. She was like, "Yeah, for white America, you can just turn the TV off and everything will be fine. But for Black America, we turn the TV off and we're still Black, and those problems still exist for us as a society." And so, what I would do, I want to challenge my white brothers and sisters out there to step up and say something when you know it's wrong. You have a very powerful voice that needs to be heard when things like this happen. And it's a shame sometimes a Black man can say all he wants to say, you know what I mean? And then a white man may say the same thing and things get done, So I think for me, I think, can we team up? You know what I'm saying? Can I get some people in the white community to step up and say, yeah, you know what? There are some things out there that are totally wrong that need to be changed. You talk about, like you said, something about systemic racism. There's a system, and you can't deny that. And if you do, we probably have to have a talk about it. You know what I mean? And it does happen. So how do we get rid of that system? You know what I mean? It's about systemic oppression. I told you to go watch the documentary called 13th and just sit there and see some things. You know what I mean? There are things that happen that shouldn't happen. I mean, in high school, for instance, high school history. I mean, man, come on, man. Once I got woke and started listening and looking at things, how they really were. I mean, man, it really. I'm like, man, how could I not be taught these things? And so you have to educate yourself, and that's what it boils down to. Educate yourself. Don't listen if you think something's kind of, go educate yourself and get educated on what's really happening in this world that we're living in today. You know what I mean? Yeah. My favorite book's going to always be the Bible. It's going to be that, because that has stood the test of time. You know what I mean? It has not changed. But other than that, for what's going on here, we need to start looking at some things and listen to the old folks. They can tell you. You know what I mean? And here's the thing about timing. My mom, not my grandma. My mom was born in a day where water fountains were separate in black and white, and bathrooms were separated in the black and white, and schools were separated in the black and white. And even when I was born, I think there was only certain hospitals that took, so I mean, it hasn't been that long.
Right.
It has not been that long. So we just need to keep moving on and keep trying to prevail over the division, like you said. But that's up to us as a people, right? Like you said, if you and I sit down and talk about some things, hopefully we come out of that conversation knowing that we're more alike than we are different. You know what I mean? But and the last thing I'll comment is on a lot of Christian men, a lot of Christian people are saying, well, it's a sin thing. You know what I mean? And I get it's a sin thing, but you can't forget that it's still a skin thing too, because the sin, and if you admit to what your sin really was, you'd have to admit that it was a racial problem if we're talking about racial issues. Yeah, it is a sin thing. We get it. I understand that more than anybody, but it's sin and skin, and we have to make sure that we address those issues in order for us to get past them.
It's that's exactly right. It is a sin thing. Racism is sin. You read your scriptures and you can see versions of racism in scripture. Not that we have time to really get in all that. Talk about this Samaritans and all that kind of stuff. But
right.
Old Testament, New Testament. It's Peter. Peter didn't think that the Gentiles were worthy of the gospel. I mean, it's the same kind of. It's the same kind of thing, and but at the end of the day, so guys like you and I, who obviously we're far apart, we haven't been in each other's proximity for decades.
Yes.
But yet the Holy Spirit in you and the Holy Spirit in me, we connect, and we recognize that we're brothers and that we love each other, and words like that. That's how Christians should be. That's how we should behave. That's how we should engage each other.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that, before it becomes racist, okay, if we're not doing that, that's sin. We're grieving and quenching the Holy Spirit in such a way that we're not connecting the way we're supposed to. That whole koinonia word, it didn't exist until in Acts, because the word koinonia, a lot of people act like it's this thing about having fellowship. Well, the word wasn't even used in the Gospels because it requires the Holy Spirit. And that bond of two men come together, two women come together, whatever, if the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, he recognizes himself. And there should be a love and a bond that is beyond just how many conversations we've had and how good of friends we are. There should be it should be different. And the church needs to live a different life in the culture we're in. The culture is going to get darker. We can't fix the culture. But, I don't think so. I think there's always going to be racism. There's always going to be poverty. There's always going to be greedy stuff. There's always going to be politicians. There's certain things that are always going to be there. Mm-hmm. But the church, being the church, my personal opinion, and maybe this is one of those moments where the darker it gets is the brighter even a small light shines.
Right.
And I'm one of those cats that fall in the category of hoping, believing, that there's going to be another great awakening. I hope that is, when I look how dark it is now, is this one of those things that it has to get this dark before Christ to, really start drawing people to himself again, because they start waking up and realizing this is not okay. Our world is messed up and it's broken. And so I'm one of those guys. I hope, I'm with you. It needs to get better, but I hope there's a great awakening, and I hope people come to Christ, and I hope lives are changed, and I want to see the church step up. And there's never been a better time than right now for the church to step up and be the church, because there's just you can't justify. I can judge you because you're stupid, okay? Mm-hmm. Or because you lied, or because you did something horrible, you stole something, or whatever. But but not because of the color of your skin.
Nope.
We are one race. We share one blood in Christ, and there's people who need to hear the story of the gospel. And it's hard to share the gospel with people who feel like that the church is, still segregated.
Yeah.
And like what Martin Luther King said, when he made his comment about that 11 o'clock is the most segregated hour in America, he actually said there's a difference in being segregated and segregating, because his church is mostly black, and he's like, my church is segregated, but we're not segregating. In words, like, white folks are welcome, mm-hmm. But where we live at, it's all black, so it's what it is. So, but there are churches that aren't that way. So we need to. God needs.
I know
to
my church. My church back home is Graceway, and they're the most diverse church I've ever been around in my life, and so I appreciate growing up in that church and the teachings and the things that we had there. So It is.
So to kind of wrap us up, Dalton, give me what do you want? What kind of message you want to leave us on? Some kind of points toward Jesus or hope or
Man, I think there's hope. I think there's hope, but like you were saying something about the light, and here's what I believe about the light is. If I'm a young white kid and I went to Christian school in elementary and I went to middle school and I went to all white Christian school and I went to all white Christian high school and now I'm going to leave off of here and go to an all white Christian college, light. You can't see the light in the light.
yeah.
So take your light. You're talking about is getting dark. There's darkness. Well, we need that light to come to the darkness and help out, so we can see. You know what I mean? And so if you just stay around your group the whole time and never make an influence anywhere on anyone else's group, it's going to stay that way. And I just really, really pray for people to get out, get amongst each other, and see how much in common we have, and we're not that different. We're not that different once we listen to each other and figure things out.
Yeah. All right, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking an hour and spending with me. And I do love you. I'm proud of you. I know.
Yeah,
we knew each other as kids,
Mhm.
and I'm proud of who you are, who you become. I'm glad you're investing your life in young kids and students trying to use the coaching as a way of just being a positive role model for them and point them toward Christ and what it's like to be a man, regardless of color of your skin, but a man that has some integrity and loves his wife and kept his family together. And so I'm proud of you. I'm proud you didn't take the easy road, that you took the hard road. And I remember the day that you got ordained. I watched online and you preached that message and all that. Man, I was,
Yeah,
it's not like you're my son or anything. I'm just proud of you. It's like, dude, I know that guy, man. Look at him.
yeah. I always share that with everybody. So you can go to YouTube and punch in "Power of Prayer," Coach Dalton Vann, and you can hit message only. So you just get the message of that. That's the day I got ordained, and more so than any touchdown and any bucket I've ever scored in the game or anything sports related. That is the most important day of my spiritual life that overrides anything else as far as any athletic accolades I've ever had. So thank God.
All right. Well, for those who are watching, thank you for watching. And we'll be back next week with another one of my guests, and we'll have a conversation with them. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.